Hey guys, now as you guys know, it's been a little while since I've reviewed Legend Tomorrow, and I didn't mean to fall behind, but as usual, I end up falling behind. But because of that, I now have 3 episodes to review. In order for me to review last night's episode, I need to review the past 3 episodes and talk about everything that went down in them. So this is my review for Legend Tomorrow, episodes 13 through 15, and I'm actually very happy to talk about this specific batch of episodes, because while I think Legend Tomorrow has been absolutely killing it, especially the second half of the season, they've really been quite consistent. These 3 are among the best. I mean, these 3 have been fantastic. I think they've really shown how much the show has improved, really exemplify how far the show has gone, and really take the show in some really wacky directions, but have really benefited them for it, and I was very happy about that. So I'm going to talk about each 3 of these episodes in great detail, give you my thoughts on them, all that kind of stuff. But with that said, let's jump right into episode 13, which is called Land of the Lost. Now, out of the 3 episodes, I do think Land of the Lost is the weakest, but that's only because the other 2 episodes are so great, and this episode is great too. But I do think this is, it's a great episode. I think it's a great episode, but among the 3, it definitely is the weakest for a couple of reasons. The main story we have going on here, I think, is genuinely great. The story here, as we know, Rip, throughout these last 2 episodes, he has basically been the villain against the Legends. His mind has been reconfigured, where he is, instead of working with the Legends, he is working against them, and he is, trying to assassinate them and kill them. So now that Sarah and all of them have him on the ship, they want to do what they can to try to go inside his mind and try to get him back to be the original Rip Hunter. And basically, we see kind of a bottle episode where you have Sarah and Jax. They're going into Rip's mind while other people are on the ship and trying to do what they can to, stay on the ship and make sure it's safe and everything like that. But Sarah and Jax get to go into Rip's mind. And Rip's mind, believe it or not, is basically an alternate reality of the ship. But in this alternate reality, everything is basically an enemy to him. Everything he thinks everyone's trying to come after him, everyone's trying to get him, and it's a really cool concept. They played with this quite well. I like the way this was done, where you have evil Sarah and evil Jax. I thought all that stuff was very well handled here, the way that was done, how he is really afraid of them. They didn't exactly give a reason why he was so afraid, but I thought it was cool to see that. I like the way they did play around with that. I like seeing this evil version of Sarah and Jax. That was really cool. But the most interesting part of this episode is actually we finally get to see, believe it or not, a human version of Gideon. I mean, who would have thought that? We actually see Gideon in human form, and I'm not gonna lie, she's pretty damn hot. It was really cool to see her in human form and everything like that. But that was definitely one of the big highlights of this episode, was getting to see a human version of Gideon. Something I never thought we'd really get to see. Nothing I've really ever asked for, but I thought it was cool overall. I thought it was definitely cool we got to see that. So that was definitely one of the highlights of this episode, was getting to see that human version of Gideon that I never really thought we'd see. I thought that was definitely cool that we saw all that. But the other big part of this episode, while this is going on, we also have Ray, Nate, and Amaya. They are basically going out to find the Delinator and basically try to, they end up in prehistoric times bound, because they need to find the last piece of the spear. There's one piece left. They need to find that last piece, and the last piece they find out is in prehistoric times. And this whole concept was a little bit silly. I definitely will say that. This whole concept of trying to find, the last piece of the Spear of Destiny, I just thought was a little bit dumb. But as a whole, this does make for some very good character development between Nate, Amaya, and Ray. Because as we know, Nate and Amaya have gotten quite close, and Ray is a little bit concerned about that. Not because he doesn't want these 2 to date. He thinks they definitely work well together. And there are a lot of great scenes where, just like in the Turncoat episode, where they were teaching each other more about themselves, there are a lot of great scenes where they're bonding over things. I thought that was definitely really fun to watch. But Ray is concerned because, as we know, Amaya is not supposed to be from this time. She is from the 60s, and the only reason she's, from the 40s actually, and the only reason she's decided to stay with them is to find Rex Taylor and try to prevent his death, and, basically try to, get vengeance on Thawne for killing him. That's why she stuck with him all this time. So I like that Nate is reminded here that this is temporary, that Amaya is not supposed to be on the ship, that what he's doing is quite dangerous, and this could really change everything, and that he really needs to understand that if he really wants to do this, then he's risking her entire lineage being extinct, and we obviously don't want that to happen. You know, we know Vixen's out there, we know that she has another child, so we know obviously she doesn't, you know, she doesn't want her entire lineage to die, and if that's going to happen, if she continues this thing she has with Nate. So I like the way that he's kind of worried about that in this episode. Thought that was definitely interesting to see. And there's some really good interplay between Stein and Mick in this episode as well, because like I said, those are two of the people who are left on the ship and don't get to do anything, but they do have really good stuff here, where Mick talks about how he lost Len, and ever since he's lost Len, you know, he's really felt that void, and that he's learned to be on his own, and that's the thing that Stein needs to do. He needs to treat Jax like a leader, because he's gonna go very soon. I mean, he's an old guy. I mean, he definitely is gonna die at some point, and he doesn't have much longer left, and he needs to really see that more intelligent side of Jax and treat Jax more like a partner and less like a kid, and that's something I really do like seeing, is seeing, you know, Stein really step up into that role. I thought that was definitely very well done. I think, again, something the show's always excelled at is the bonding between characters and the chemistry that they have, and this is a very good example that taking two characters who don't interact a lot but actually are very similar, and I really do love the way the show has always done that. And Ray, you know, he apologized for Nate for being very overly cautious, and it seems like things are going well between them in this episode. Like, they have a good relationship. It doesn't really seem like they have much to worry about, but that is definitely brought up again in the next episode, which we'll get into. But long story short, at the end of this episode, basically, we end up seeing Jax has to call on Stein. Stein has to help him try to, you know, extinguish this evil side of him. They basically were reminding the partners have to believe in each other, and you know, basically they, you know, we see that Jax is actually smart, and that's something that Stein realizes, that Jax is just as smart as he is, and that they need to rely on each other for that. I realized that was cool. But the ending of this episode, Rip finally is back to his old self, which I thought was really cool to see, and I'm okay with it, because this Rip is not in charge. He is part of the team, but he's not in charge. Sarah is still the leader, and I like seeing that. He remembers everything. He apologized for what he did under the Legion's under influence, and basically he talks about how much Sarah, you know, motivated him, and how much he cares about her and things like that. I thought that was definitely really cool. And he ends up going up, and even Gideon ends up remembering their kiss. I mean, he literally remembers everything, which is really cool. But he goes up to each member, basically talks about all they've contributed, and it was just a really good way to reintroduce Rip into the story. I thought it was very well done overall, and that perfectly leads us into the next episode, where they want to find out where the last fragment is, and basically Rip says that he does, and that of course is at NASA, which we'll get into the last episode. This was a very good way to finally conclude that arc of Rip being, you know, going rogue and not remembering, and finally getting his memory back, finally remembering who the Legends are. You know, one of the things the season has benefited from is Rip not being on, but the fact he was on for the last few episodes, I think, actually really did benefit the show. There was definitely something the show was missing. I think Arthur Darville's presence definitely was that. They've done a lot of good stuff with Rip, and in these next two episodes, they really know how to use him quite well, and I was very happy to see him return. I thought overall this was a very well done episode. The only real complaint I have over this episode is that the effects on the T-Rex and the stuff in the prehistoric times looked really cheap, honestly. It looked very cheap, and I get it that the show doesn't have the biggest budget, and that definitely they don't have as big a budget as, say, The Flash or Arrow, but the effects here really did not look that great, and I really felt like they could have added a little bit more to the overall effects, just to make it look a little more appealing, and it just, I've seen, you know, I've seen theme parks look better, honestly. Like, I really did not think the effects looked that great, and there wasn't a lot going on with the Legion of Doom. We got a break from the Legion in this episode. We didn't see a ton of them, but they come back in a big way in these next two episodes, and that's something that I think the next two episodes really did benefit from. However, as good as that episode was, it does not compare to the last two episodes, because these two episodes are among the best of the show. I think they are some of the most interesting concept the show has done. They've been some of the most thrilling, some of the most funny. They really have everything we love about the show and combine them into these episodes. But let's first talk about Moonshot, because this episode was great. I really did love this episode overall. The majority of this episode takes place in 1970, but we actually start off in 1965, where Rip ends up taking Henry Haywood, who we find out is Nate's grandfather. He takes him in New York City and explains he has to disappear with the spear fragment and start a new life. And basically, Henry figures that his wife Betty is gonna die in Leipzig and will be left to raise the baby on their own, but Rip assures that Hank's sacrifice will save the world, and basically Henry asks Rip to give his grandson his dog tag. So there was a nice thing going on with Henry. I like the way he does actually play a role in this episode. But basically, they arrive seconds later, but Amaya warns that Henry's a master of concealment and infiltration. They don't really know if they can find Henry, then neither can the Legion. You know, if they can't find him, then maybe the Legion won't be able to find him. So they don't know if this is really going to actually work, if they're actually going to be able to locate him or whatever. But basically, they end up returning to Wave Rider. They go to the 70s here, and they figure out that Henry will look for work in a job that was basically patriotic, that he was a fighter pilot before he joined the JSA, because he was, as we know, part of the JSA. And I like the way they're incorporating the JSA here. Like, they're finding ways to put the JSA into different scenarios, even though the JSA's timeline is kind of irrelevant right now and doesn't exactly exist. They're still finding ways to incorporate them in the story, because, yeah, that is one of the cruxes of the story. I mean, that's how this whole thing started off, was, you know, the killing of Rex Tyler. That really was the rising action towards this season, was, you know, that was the inciting incident, so to speak. That's what that was. So, basically, Ray realized that it was the day that Apollo 13 was endangered, we find out, and basically that's what this episode is, that they go through Apollo 13. They're trying to do what they can to, you know, basically obtain that last fragment that they need. And it's a really nice, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on here. You know, you get some really nice interplay as usual. Basically, we see, you know, in this, there's some really great stuff going on, like I said, with Nate and Henry. I thought that interplay was very good. You know, Henry explains he was never really supposed to see Rip again. And obviously he has a history of Rip, because we know that Rip has been traveling for a long time. So he definitely does know Rip exists. And Nate explains that there's a Legion that are hunting the fragment of the spear, and that Dr. Midnight is trying to protect his fragments. And Henry says that he had his fragments somewhere safe. Nate realized that he put on the flag that Neil Armstrong planted on the moon, and basically they realize that history has changed, we find out. And Henry has figured out how to save the Apollo 13 astronauts, but Henry confirms that everything's going great. So we see the Legion has actually changed things. So immediately, that's very compelling. The fact the Legion changed things on them, I mean, that's just crazy. That's compelling in itself, that they already had things change, and they have to do what they can to try to get things back and try to get the Apollo 13 to work out the way it is, because as we know, that wasn't a great mission. It was very, you know, treacherous, and they've changed it so it's not that. And basically, we see the 3 astronauts reporting to Houston that they're entering the dark side of the moon, will be losing their signal, and Thawne actually injects Lowville and Hazel the sedative. He drops his disguise, so he's trying to get things done the way he can to basically try to sabotage the mission, and Sarah figures out they need to intercept Apollo 13 before it lands on the moon, because if they don't, they could all end up dying, which obviously they don't want to do, so they need to do what they can to try to save them. There's a lot of stuff going on with that. I thought there was a really nice rescue mission going on there, and I really loved a lot of stuff going on. I thought there was some really good, they really did take a lot of chances here, because there's kind of a found footage aspect when Ray ends up in a ship with Thawne, and Thawne actually tells him how similar these two really are, which, if you really think about it, yeah, I mean, what's the one thing that Ray wanted in the beginning of the show was to be relevant and to have some sort of, you know, role in life, and Thawne wants that too. As we know, Thawne exists in a time that doesn't exist. You know, that's the only reason why he's around. You know, the timeline that he's part of doesn't exist anymore. And that's something that Thawne has dealt with throughout this entire season, that he's tried to make himself relevant again. And I like the way he really did compare himself to Ray with this episode. I thought there was some really cool stuff there, the way they did that. I definitely really did love the way that was all handled. And, basically, Amaya ends up telling Henry that he can't return to 1956 because it's going to change the future, and they need to do what they can to try and make sure Apollo 13 works. But there are bigger problems when we see that because they are on outer space, they don't know if they're actually going to be able to return to their home planets. There's a lot of things, you know, there's a lot of tension there. We don't know if it's actually going to work. I thought that, again, was really well done. You know, all that tension was just really good. There's a lot of really good tension throughout this episode, but there's also a lot of fun. There's a great scene where Jack Jax has to create some sort of a diversion to hack into this mission control thing, and Mick and Stein to distract him, and Stein's up saying the banana boat song to distract them. Just one of the funniest moments we've had on the show. Victor Garber really got to tap into his musical roots between that and the recent Flash Mules crossover. They're really utilizing his musical talents quite well, and it's not the first time they did the season. As we know, in episode 2, he had to do the same thing, and it was even better here. I thought it was a lot of fun to watch. Just everyone's reaction was really funny, and that's something I like. That the show knows how to be funny, but also be serious in a way that other DC shows don't, and I really like the way the show has really found that balance between those two. They found it quite well. Definitely, I thought that was definitely very well done. But in the end, obviously, they do end up pulling off the mission. Everything goes the way it's supposed to. I like the way that Henry and Nate actually did kind of fix things here, where Nate admits his father wasn't there for him either, but he knew that he loved him, but he couldn't show him. And Hank feels the same way, that Hank feels that his father isn't always there for him, and Hank says it isn't fair, and he says if he can accept it, then him and his son will be a better man. It was nice bonding stuff there. I like the way that was all handled, and we get this nice scene with Sarah and Rip, where Rip even admits that she's a better captain than he ever was, and yeah, it's because she's not brooding all the time. She's not doing things for her own benefit. She's doing things for the team, and he wonders what his place in the team is if he's not the captain, and she points out he's a misfit, and she finally tells him that he's a legend like the rest of them, and it feels like such a triumphant moment that Rip's had this discovery that he doesn't have to be in charge, that he can be a legend. He doesn't have to be the one who is, trying to fix everything. And I like seeing that. I like seeing he's realizing he doesn't need to do everything. I thought that was definitely really well done. But the way the episode ends is truly devastating, because we end with Nate's basically, Amaya wants to know what her future is going to entail and the life she's going to be leaving behind, and basically what's going to happen if she does leave behind that life. And despite Nate telling her that she's not going to like what she sees, she decides it's something that she needs to do, and that's exactly what she does. She asks Gideon to show her the historical record on Zambazi after she returns home. But the AI counselor against knowing the future, but Amaya repeats her request, and Gideon's to bring it the data, and this really does change Amaya as a whole. Overall, this is one of the best episodes the show has done. I think it was very intense. I think it had some really fun moments in there. They really utilized the supporting cast quite well. A lot of times, the supporting cast, they just don't cast the right actors, but I really thought they did a good job here. I really love this episode as a whole. It's one of the best episodes this season. I really thought they had a lot of fun with this one overall. But without a doubt, the best episode of these three has to be Fellowship of the Spear. This episode is incredible. Not only is it as intense as Moonshot and has a lot of that, urgency that episode had, it might very well be the best episode of the show because of the stakes in this episode. The stakes are very high, and unlike other episodes, this one does have a major change on the show that could very well change the entire course of the series. I don't know, but the way things wrap up here, that very well seems like it could be the case, because a lot of this episode, it's all about trying to keep the spear out of the wrong person's hands, because now they have the spear. They're trying to do what they can to try to keep it away from the Legion of Doom, and in order for them to do that, they need to go back to the vanishing point, which was essentially 1916, the First World War, and there's a lot of intense stuff going on. The show really took a lot of risks, and the war scenes felt very real, but a lot of this involves them trying to track down J.R.R. Tolkien, who, yes, he did write the Lord of the Rings series, but he also fought in World War I, apparently. I don't know if he actually did, but the show said he did, and they have to do what they can to try to track him down. Again, very good casting. I really like the actor that played J.R.R. Tolkien. I thought definitely he was quite good, and they have to try to find him to try to, stop the battle and try to get the Spear of Destiny and do what they can. And basically, there's a lot of stuff going on here because, one, Nate knows this is going to be one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. So this is a very dangerous situation for them because if they die, then, they're going to lose completely. And then they will truly be irrelevant, especially if Amaya dies. I mean, her entire timeline's erased. And Amaya is very much haunted by that throughout this episode. Like, she knows what her future is going to be, and she wants to change it. She really wants to do what she can to try to make her story better, but she just can't do that. She probably has one of the most complex situations out of any of the characters throughout this show, is that she really is dealing with this idea that she wants to be able to change things, and she wants to be able to control her own life, but unfortunately she can't. Her future's already set in stone, and she really wants to do what she can to change it, because she doesn't like where, it's headed for her, and she unfortunately can't do anything about it, which kind of sucks. And so we got that going on. We also, like I said, got them trying to track down J.R.R. Tolkien. But the big stuff in this episode involves Mick. Mick really is the star of this episode in many ways, because throughout the episode, he is still brooding over Len's death, and how Len, he felt, died for nothing, and that it was foolish that Len died when he did. Even though he tried to sacrifice himself, he really feels that Len died for nothing, and ever since then, he's been haunted by his spirit to try to come back. And Len actually joins the Legion of Doom. Yeah, they found an earlier version of Snart, and he's now joined the Legion of Doom. But this is Snart before he became good, and he decided to become good and become, you know, a good guy and things like that. This is the Snart we saw in Season 1. Remember how I said in Season 1, oh, Mick will always see him again? Well, it hasn't been that easy, because obviously the Legion of Doom has recruited him, and Snart is doing what he can to try to provoke Mick and try to get him to come on the team. And you can see Mick, he's really going back and forth between this episode, because at the same time, while he does love being a hero, the legends haven't exactly treated him, you know, equally. They've kind of always been very tenuous about him. Like, sure, he's done some good heroic things, but they've always kind of been like, oh, I don't know, you know, maybe he's on our side, maybe he's not. And it's one of the most compelling things we're dealing with this episode, is Mick going back and forth between, am I a legend or am I in the Legion? Where do I really belong here? You know, what is my place? And I thought they handled all that really, really well. And like I said, the action this episode is truly fantastic. It felt like we're watching a war movie at some points. They really did a great job here, and basically they end up basically forcing in the episode. What I love at the episode is that things end devastatingly here. Like, for once, the Legends don't win, which, sure, last year was very common for them, but this year we've seen them win a lot, and it seems like things are really going to go their way, and as much as they tried, they don't win here. They actually order the Legends to hand over the spear, or they're just going to straight up kill them. So Sarah tells Mick to give her the spear, because they really don't have a choice, but he holds it to his chest and says he doesn't have any friends, and Mick actually ends up joining the Legion, because he tells Legends they've been trying to change him ever since he joined, and he truly does not feel he's a good guy. He feels that he's supposed to be a bad guy, and that's where his destiny truly is. But the Legends have tried to mess with that, and they've turned him into something he's not. And the reason he's seen these visions of Snart is because he truly is supposed to be a villain, and that's what he was always meant to be. So basically, Snart ends up taking the spear, Thawne arrives, speeds off, and they lose. And I was surprised that they lose as much as they did, but yeah, they lose. And not only that, but we see that Mick ends up telling Sarah that he wishes things could have been different, and he almost tries to get Amaya to come with him, but she refuses, and I think it just shows that Amaya knows she can't change things. Like, she has a future she needs to get back to, and as much as she doesn't want to, she knows she has to, and it sucks, but that's just kind of the situation that they're in. So, in the end, we see that not only does that happen, but we see, you know, Jax is really relenting about how they trusted Mick, and they don't really understand it. Ray wonders if they really did trust him, because honestly, they didn't really show him that much of decency, and they always kind of were back and forth on him. But Rip figures that it doesn't matter now. The reality itself is threatened. They know that definitely something's going to be changed. And in the end, we end this episode with them getting exactly what they want. They get the Spear of Destiny. They grab the Spear of Destiny, and Malcolm arrives with the Calibros, which is the word of God, and it says how to use the spear. And not only do they do that, they grab the spear. Malcolm recites from the Calibros, and others join in, and the spear flares of power, and we alter reality, and that is the way this episode ends. Really incredible stuff overall, but let's just get into this episode and where I think we're going to go for the rest of the season. So, like I said, some really incredible episodes here. I think these were among some of the best the show has done. But let's talk about this twist, because not only is this twist shocking in the fact that the Legends actually lost, but it also really could alter the course of the show. I mean, now we have a reality where anything is possible. Who knows how much the Legion is willing to change? Who knows how much they're actually willing to, really upend and really try to, disrupt you. There are a lot of things that could go right, but there are also a lot of things that could go wrong. And who says that the Legion's, the Legion's alternate reality is the good one? Who says this is going to be their preferred reality? Who knows what's going to happen here? Who knows really what they're going to try to do? And I can't wait to see what ends up going down there, because there are just so many directions they can take that specific plotline in. But beyond that, I thought this also was a great episode for a lot of the characters. Like I said, Mick in particular, you can really tell that Mick has realized that he's not a hero. He wants to be a villain. He doesn't feel respected with the Legends, and he wants to get that respect from the Legion. The Legion does respect him because he truly is meant to be a villain. And I don't know if that's where he's going to stay, but I think it was interesting that he decided to stay with the Legion. Like, they didn't force him to do it, but he did it because he felt he belonged more, and he felt like this was the place where he really should be. And I thought that was definitely interesting to see the way that was all done. I thought they did some really good stuff with him in this episode, but also for Amaya. As we know, Amaya, you know, throughout this episode, she is kind of contemplating what to do, but I think she's realizing that her future's set in stone and she can't change it. Even though she wants to, she just can't do anything to change it, and it really sucks that things have to be the way it is, especially for her and Nate. You know, you definitely do feel bad for Nate in this situation, but it just is the way it is, and unfortunately, they can't change it. Even though he wants to, her future set in stone, they can't really change anything, so it's kind of sad to see what's going to end up happening there. But such incredible stuff with these episodes. I really am impressed with how far the show has gone. They've really found the perfect balance of character and also, you know, some really great, you know, funny stuff, and also being a very fun show. Does it make sense a lot? No, but the show does a great job of being one of those shows where it doesn't need to make sense. It can just be a fun show, and they've nailed that very well. This was really, this episode, Fellowship of the Spear, was the first episode that felt like, one, it made sense, two, you understood why these characters did what they did. It wasn't completely nonsensical. It made actually a ton of sense what was going on, why things worked out the way it did, but it also felt like the one with the most urgency. I mean, the action scenes here felt real. You really felt like you were in World War I. There was a lot at stake here. This was a very bloody battle, as we know, and things could go really badly for the Legends. You know, if one of them got killed, who knows what would have happened. And already their life is on the line. I mean, who knows they're all going to survive? Who knows what situation they're going to be in? I mean, there are a lot of places they can go with this story, and I can't wait to see really where they're going to go with that. I think overall that's going to be very interesting to see the way that all turns out. But beyond that, though, I really have loved these 3 episodes. I love where the show is going. I think out of all the out of all the DC shows on the CW, this is the most ambitious. They've taken a lot of risks this season. They've done a lot of things differently, and it's really made them all the better for it. By changing up a lot of the formula and finding things that work and things that don't, I think they've really nailed that great balance, like I said, between comedy and character, and also some really great dramatic stuff in there. And now I'm going to rate each episode as a whole. So for Season 2, Episode 13, Land of the Lost, I would give that episode a 4 out of 5 or a B+. For Season 2, Episode 16, Moonshot, I would definitely give that episode a 4.75 out of 5 or an A. One of the best episodes the show has done. And then for the most recent episode, Season 2, Episode 15, Fellowship of the Spear. You guys are going to be really shocked, but I genuinely think this is the best episode of the show, and I am going to give it a 5 out of 5 or an A+. Without a doubt, I was the most compelled by this episode. I was the most into it. I found it to be the most layered, the most developed, the one with the most depth, the one with the most character, the one with the most urgency, and in the end, it really does show how impressive the show has become. They found ways to take characters that were annoying, i.e. Rip, and make them a lot more compelling. I think they've done an incredible job with that this season. I can't wait to see the rest of the season's going to go. I can't imagine how much they're going to, you know, how much this reality is going to be alternated. There are a lot of places they can go with that, and I can't wait to see where else we go throughout this very tumultuous and very impressive and eventful second season. So for guys, maybe this episode, Legends Tomorrow. Let me know what you guys thought of these episodes overall. Loved your thoughts in it. I'd love to hear what you were thinking of the direction the show is going. Do you like that Rip is back? Do you like the choice that Mick made? Do you agree with what he did? Do you not agree? Just love to hear your thoughts about all that stuff. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm officially caught up on Legends Tomorrow, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for the latest episode, Legends Tomorrow, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.